Hello, welcome to Ennara Reacts. Today I am watching another video from the Fat Electrician, and this one is on RAF's Legless Antihero, Sir Douglas Bada. Let's see how that goes.
You know somebody's an absolute gangster when they're not an American, and I'm still gonna make a video about them. Today we're talking about Sir Douglas Bada, a World War II British RAF fighter pilot ace with at least 22 confirmed kills, and he managed to do all of that as a double amputee with no legs, which I think we can all agree is a pretty impressive feat.
That was bad
Or
wording.
lack thereof. But first, a word from our sponsor, because this video is brought to you by PermaSafe. All right, here's the deal. PermaSafe is not the average set of rubber gloves that you've seen at the hospital before. These things are designed for people that work outside of a clinical setting with their hands.
I didn't think if you were an amputee, you'd be allowed still in the military.
Or something hazardous. Your paramedics, your law enforcement officers, construction workers, mechanics, farmers, anybody that's working a manual labor job where typical rubber gloves simply aren't going to hold up, you have PermaSafe. These things have diamond texture on the palms so that even if your hands get greasy or wet, you still have traction and you're able to grab stuff. They're also twice as thick and 4 times more puncture and tear resistant. Okay, check this out. Okay, look at this. That's like half a gallon of water inside this rubber glove right now. That's quality jiggling right there, okay? I'm pretty sure this is what the Hulk's jeans are made out of. Oh no, now my hands are all wet from filling up that other glove with a bunch of water. Listen to all the traction and grip I still have with these goddamn gloves. And here's the best part about these. You don't have to go to a special website. You don't have to follow my link. You don't have to use my discount code. You can just go to Amazon. They are on Amazon Prime. You can order these and have them at your house tomorrow. And I know what you're thinking, but chubby electron guy, I don't need rubber gloves, okay? Listen to me. Rubber gloves are like jumper cables and condoms. You never need them until you need them. Just trust me on this one. Go to Amazon, buy yourself a box of PermaSafe gloves, keep them in your car, in your garage, and at some point in the future, you're gonna be holding something absolutely disgusting in your hands. You're gonna be like, wow, Fat Electrician was right. This was definitely worth the money. So yeah, get yourself some PermaSafe gloves, because shit happens. It just doesn't have to happen on your hands. Back to the video.
Yeah.
All right, Douglas Bader, born in London in 1910. World War I was going on when he was a child. His father and his older brother-in-law both fought in World War I. His father was an engineer, and his brother-in-law was a fighter pilot. Because of that, young Douglas knew that he wanted to be a fighter pilot too. So fast forward 1928, Bada's 18 years old. He just graduated from high school. He immediately joins the RAF as a cadet pilot, as well as going to Cambridge for college. And while doing that, he would become a star athlete for both organizations. While at Cambridge, he would play hockey, box, and become a star rugby player. Apparently, he was so good at rugby that it was believed that after college, he would join the national team to represent his country. And then for the RAF, he would end up playing on their official cricket team. I have no idea what cricket is, and I really don't care to learn.
Nobody understands cricket.
I've heard of it.
Know what a crumpet is.
Don't know how to play it.
I mean, yeah, I thought Crumpet was the mountain that the Grinch lived on, so obviously I have no idea what's going on. Fast forward again 2 years, 1930, he's still going to college at Cambridge, but he graduates from a cadet to a full-fledged commissioned pilot in the RAF, at which point he becomes known as an absolute daredevil while also being extremely talented. He can pull off every aerial maneuver known to man at this point, including some that are so dangerous that they're banned. And not only does he do those maneuvers, he does them below 2,000 feet, which is also against the rules because it's extremely dangerous. But Bader doesn't care about rules. He doesn't care what you tell him. That's just guidelines. He's going to do what he wants. Because of that, he actually gets selected to represent his squadron at the Hendon Air Show in a flying competition, which he wins. Then later that year in 1931, he is preparing to go defend his title at the Hendon Air Show in early 1932, at which point he tries a dangerous maneuver too close to the ground, and the wing of his Bristol Bulldog catches the ground, crashes the entire plane, crushing his legs. Because of this, both of his legs would have to get amputated, one above the knee and one just below the knee. At this point, you have to remember it's the 1930s. He is told that he's never going to be able to walk again without crutches. And that's what they believed because nobody had ever done it before. But you also have to remember, Bada doesn't care what people tell him. The same attitude that got him into this mess by not listening to the rules is the same attitude that's going to get him out of this mess by not listening to what the experts tell him he's going to be capable of doing. Over the course of his rehabilitation, not only does he regain the ability to walk without crutches or a cane, something he was told was going to be impossible, he also regains the ability to drive his sports car, golf, and dance, all on dual prosthetics. And he managed to do all of that in 4 months, essentially by himself, because all the experts thought it was impossible. It wasn't like modern day where there's an expert that has a refined
Not talking modern prosthetics either.
Out in his situation. No, this man blazed the entire path on his own with no background in physical therapy. He just figured it out. So fast forward June 1932, 5 months after losing both of his legs, he shows back up to the RAF like, hey guys, made a full recovery, let's get me up in one of those planes so I can take it for a spin, at which point they tell him, absolutely not, you don't have your legs, we're not gonna let you fly. He then argues with the RAF, to which they agree that they're gonna let him have a test flight with another pilot, and if he does good, everything should be fine. So that's exactly what they do. He takes a plane up, he does a bunch of maneuvers, he lands the plane, all with the use of his prosthetic legs, no problem whatsoever because he is a phenomenal pilot. He then gets cleared by a medical board saying that he is fit for active duty, and he is reinstated as a pilot. Fast forward 1 year later, April 1933, the RAF, for seemingly no reason, decided that they were going to reverse that decision and ground him because there was nothing in the King's regulations in regards to a legless pilot. To which Bada's like, yeah, no shit, I'm the first guy that's ever done it ever. That's why you guys put me through all that testing and a med board to see if I could do it, and I've been doing it for the last year. Why would you ground me now? To which the RAF was like, don't really care. That's what we decided. Fuck you. Get out of the plane. Bada is then informed that he has to pick a new job where he stays on the ground, and Bada, being a man of his stature, isn't going to stand for that shit, so he retires early. From there, he spends the next couple of years collecting his military pension, working a desk job, golfing 36 holes a day. He also meets his wife and starts to settle down. Then, over the course of 1937, 1938, Douglas would write the Air Ministry multiple times saying, hey, if the next World War is going to kick off, let me know. I'm happy to come back and fly a plane for you. Then fast forward, sure enough, September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland, World War II kicks off, and the RAF finally decides to call back Douglas Bada. So Douglas shows back up at an RAF base, and he is pumped because last time he was flying planes was 8 years ago, and they were like old biplanes like his Bristol Bulldog. Now they got Spitfires, they got Hurricanes. Planes have come a long ways in 8 years, and he is absolutely thrilled to be able to get up and fly one. And at this point, RAF leadership yet again informs Douglas, oh, we're not actually going to let you fly a plane. You don't have any legs.
What'd you call him back
that
for?
Would be preposterous. We thought you wanted to join the war effort and do a ground job just to help out. At which point, Douglas is furious.
I'm a peacock! You gotta let me fly!
Luckily, however, some of the people that Douglas had served with prior 8 years ago were now higher ranking officers, and they had some pull, and they convinced the higher leadership to give this guy a shot because he's an incredible pilot. So the higher ups finally agree to give Douglas a shot, but that shot entails him going back through flight school all over again, which he does, and after his first 11 hours of flying with an instructor, he is finally allowed to take up a plane on his own, and the first thing he does is invert it and fly it upside down at a low altitude right past all the instructors. Basically giving all of the instructors the middle finger. He then peels off and goes and does a bunch of other maneuvers, and you have to realize this is the first time he's been inside of the cockpit of a plane by himself in like a decade, and last time he was flying a plane solo, it was his Bristol Bulldog, which is a biplane, and now he's flying a Spitfire. This is a huge upgrade, and he is blown away at how incredible this plane handles. He's able to take turns and pull off maneuvers way tighter and way faster than he ever would have dreamed of being able to do inside of a biplane. And initially, he gives all the credit to the new airplane and how advanced aircrafts have become. But then over the course of a little bit more training, he starts to realize not all the other pilots can pull off these turns and maneuvers as tight and as fast as he can inside of the Spitfire. They have the same plane. Is he just that much better than these guys, or what is going on? And then it dawns on him.
Well, you ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dane.
Yes, I know that.
He realizes that it's all because of G-force, because when a pilot takes a turn or does a maneuver, they're exposed to G-force, and if they do it too fast or too tight, they're exposed to too much G-force, all the blood in their body rushes down to their legs, and they lose consciousness. Okay, you see where this is going? Doug doesn't have any legs for the blood to rush to. G-force is just Viagra to this guy at this point. Dude is literally the real-life version of Star Fox. Yeah, remember the Nintendo video game? You ever notice how Star Fox and everybody in his crew all have metal legs? According to the internet lore, it's because they all had their legs amputated to resist G-force more. In a weird twist of fate, his disability has turned into a physical advantage inside the cockpit of a fighter plane. He quite literally has a leg up on the competition. And because of this, a lot of other fighter pilots and high-ranking officers in the RAF start to not like Bada because they claim that he's arrogant and difficult to work with, because here he is getting told he's never going to walk again. Not only does he walk again, he learns how to golf, he learns how to drive a car, and now here he is out piloting most of them. What an arrogant prick. Luckily, Doug doesn't really give a shit. He's not here to make friends, he's here to win a war, and that's exactly what he sets about doing. His first combat mission is over the skies of Dunkirk during Operation Dynamo. If you don't know, this is the operation where they had to evacuate the entire British military from Dunkirk. Yes, this is what the movie Dunkirk is about. If you don't know, basically when Germany took over France using their new blitzkrieg tactic, they took over France so fast that the British army couldn't even get a foothold inside of France to start fighting back. The entire military was caught and surrounded in the city of Dunkirk, and they had to evacuate their entire army, barely making it out with their lives. And Douglas Bada was in the skies over Dunkirk in a Spitfire, running defense for these guys while they got evacuated. During this time, Bada claimed to have shot down 5 German Messerschmitt Bf 109s, but he is only officially credited with shooting down 1 and potentially damaging several others, because every time Bada says that he shot down an enemy plane, it is extremely scrutinized, because again, a lot of the other fighter pilots in leadership don't like him because they think he's an arrogant prick. So literally every plane that Bada is officially credited with shooting down has been spotted by him, his wingmen, and an independent third party on the ground to verify that he shot that plane down before they would give him credit for it. But that's besides the point. Whether he shot down 1 enemy or 5 ultimately doesn't really matter, because Douglas Bada and the rest of the RAF were able to hold off the German Air Force from bombing the men on the ground long enough for the entire British military to get evacuated so that they could live to fight another day. And because of this, Douglas was promoted to squadron leader and given command of Squadron 242, or at least what was left of it. You see, Squadron 242 was a bunch of Canadian Hurricane pilots that had been stationed in France and had been fighting the Luftwaffe for a while, and they had sustained heavy losses and their morale was cripplingly low. Bada comes in as their new leader, turns the entire squadron around, takes a squadron in shambles, and turns them into an effective fighting force again, cutting through red tape and bureaucratic bullshit to get his men what they needed to be successful. And because of this, even more of his peers and the chain of command starts to like him less, because he is sticking up for his subordinates. And to me, this is the most important part of the entire story, because as this story continues to go on, you're going to notice that the more successful this man becomes, the more and more some people tend to not like him and try to trash his reputation. I have watched countless interviews of other people talking about their relationship with Douglas Bada when he was alive, and all of their opinions can be summed up into one of two. Opinion number 1, he is a literal superhero. Opinion number 2, he was an arrogant prick, but even I can't deny he was a good fighter pilot. And oddly enough, all of the people that thought he was an arrogant prick were fighter pilots that were in an adjacent unit, or leaders that were in an adjacent unit, not his unit, because his chain of command absolutely loved him, and all of the men that served underneath him also absolutely loved him. To give you an idea of how highly his men thought of him, one of the pilots that served underneath him, Sir Alan Smith, later in life said in an interview about the time that Douglas Bada made him second in command for a mission, "It felt like God had told me to come up and keep an eye on heaven for him." Which to me says everything, because I think how you're perceived by your subordinates is a far better metric of your character than how you are seen by the people competing against you for a promotion. I'm pretty sure you're wrong, because I read on the internet one time that somebody's grandpa met him once during World War II, and that guy's grandpa told him that Douglas Bada wasn't very polite. Jesus Christ. Okay, first of all, word of mouth 4 degrees removed is not a reputable source, so I don't really care. Second of all, even if that was true, let's put it into perspective. Your grandpa met the guy while he was in World War II. Okay, so at this point in time, Douglas Bada is literally a legless man in the biggest ass-kicking contest the world has ever seen, and he's winning, okay? The guy's probably got a lot on his plate. It wouldn't surprise me if he was a little stressed out and maybe angry sometimes, okay? Shit happens. Get over it. You know what? I'm sorry. I'm getting sidetracked. It just really, really annoys me when people that have never met somebody go out of their way to shit on their legacy for doing something incredible because it makes them feel better about themselves. Anyways, moving on. All right, fast forward July 1940, Douglas and Squadron 242 are going to partake in the defense of Great Britain during the Battle of Britain, which, if you don't know, is a period in time between July and October of 1940 where the Germans essentially tried to bomb Great Britain every single day. During this time, Squadron 242 is credited with shooting down 62 enemies and only having 4 of their own shot down. Of those 62 enemies that were shot down, 4 of them were shot down by Douglas Bader. This would bring his career total to 5, officially making him an ace fighter pilot. Because of this, news outlets pick up the story and they begin to portray Douglas as the hero of the Battle of Great Britain, essentially using him for pure propaganda, like, hey, check this out, Great Britain has a legless fighter ace, and he is helping to win the war against the Nazis. We literally have a legless man beating you guys in an ass-kicking contest. What's up? So now Douglas is getting all this attention. He's being used for effective propaganda, which is great, but it also serves to drive the divide even further between him and the other fighter pilots that already didn't like him, because now they're jealous that he's getting a bunch of attention for doing just as well as a lot of them did. And if that wasn't bad enough, he's now also on the shit list of the really high-ranking officers in the RAF because he had the audacity to back up his boss and friend, Lee Mallory. Basically, the standard operating procedure for the RAF during the defense of Britain was kind of like aerial guerrilla tactics. As soon as they identified an incoming bombing run, they would scramble a small group of RAF fighters that would go up and utilize hit-and-run tactics to shoot down the bombers. Lee Mallory, on the other hand, thought that they should respond with overwhelming force in a strategy that he referred to as the Big Wing. And this was essentially taking somewhere between 3 and 5 squadrons in one giant formation, like 50 to 70 fighter planes, all at once, a lot of planes altogether, running right towards the bombing runs. And Douglas agreed that this was a good strategy, and he was a huge proponent of it. Ultimately, throughout the Battle of Britain, the Big Wing was only used 5 times. Of the 5 times that it was used, the men that flew in the formation said that it was incredibly effective and they shot down a bunch of enemies. The men that did not fly in the formation said that it wasn't as effective as they're claiming it was and that they're lying.
They were jealous.
So that aspect is kind of an unknown, but we do know for certain that planes flying in the Big Wing formation were safer because there's safety in numbers. That makes sense. They were less likely to get shot down. The downside of the Big Wing was that it took a lot of time to get that many planes up in the air and in formation, so response time was lower. So as far as which plane was better, aerial guerrilla warfare or the Big Wing, I'm not really sure, but one thing is for certain, using both of them multiple times had a beneficial effect, because the first time the Big Wing was used, all the German pilots were being told that Great Britain only had 10, 15, 20 aircrafts left, and they go out on this bombing run.
Obviously showed them to be incorrect.
70 Spitfires and Hurricanes and just fucks up their whole day. It had a devastating effect on enemy morale. And on top of that, now they don't know what the British tactics are. They have to both anticipate being attacked with overwhelming numbers and being attacked with a small, fast, responsive hit-and-run force, which made it very difficult for the Germans to plan their attacks because now they had to plan for both overwhelming numbers and a fast, responsive force. So yeah, in addition to his newfound fame, people are also upset that he had the audacity to have an opinion of how to conduct aerial warfare, even though he's an ace fighter pilot, presumably an expert in aerial warfare, but whatever. Regardless, Douglas ends up getting a promotion to wing commander, and he is now in charge of 3 squadrons instead of 1. So then, from late 1940 to August of 1941, Douglas and his men take the fight to the Germans, flying hundreds of missions, shooting down a ton of Germans. Douglas himself shoots down an additional 17, bringing his career total to 22, 6 probables, and a bunch more shared. But on August 9th, 1941, Douglas Bader would fly his last mission ever when he would collide in mid-air with a German Messerschmitt Bf-109. Somehow Douglas survives the initial impact, but his plane is absolutely going down, so he quickly opens the canopy and goes to climb out of the plane, but the impact has crushed one of his prosthetic legs inside the cockpit, and he can't get out. So he's pulling on it, he's desperately trying to get out of his plane, and time is running out. He only has a few seconds left, and he says, fuck it, it's worth a shot, and he opens his parachute while still inside the plane. His parachute catches wind and rips him out of his prosthetic and out of the cockpit. He then attempts to evade German capture, hopping around on a single prosthetic leg. He is eventually captured and becomes a prisoner of war. Okay, now to be fair, technically we don't know for sure that it was a mid-air collision that he was involved in because his plane was never recovered, and like I said, everything Douglas reports back is extremely scrutinized because leadership doesn't like him. And they came to the conclusion that Douglas made up the mid-air collision story because he didn't want to have to admit that he was shot down and bested by a German pilot. And the reasoning for that is that the German documentation captured after the war didn't show that there was any mid-air collision around this time period. Here's a caveat to that. The documentation also didn't show that they shot down Douglas either. So now the leading theory is that he was actually a victim of friendly fire somehow. Which, you know what, to be fair, as much as I want to have Bader's back on this one, if you take a step back and really look at it, it does make perfect sense, because What person in their right mind would take the word of their own guy who was fucking there and lived through it over the word of the German military in the 1940s? I mean, the Germans back then were just batting 100. They never fucking lied about anything ever. They definitely didn't build an entire military in secrecy, violating the Treaty of Versailles so they could try to take over the fucking planet. And they definitely didn't have a crazy military dictator dosed up on amphetamines and testosterone who people were literally scared to give him bad news. There's no way that they would lie on this documentation. All right, so back to Douglas. He's hanging out at this POW camp with one prosthetic leg. Word finally gets spread around throughout Britain and throughout the German ranks that they finally caught the famous legless fighter ace that the British had. And upon hearing that, one of Germany's most famous fighter pilot aces, Adolf Galland, who had apparently been running missions against Bata for a while now, wanted to go meet him in person. And for whatever reason, he's actually nice to Bata, so nice that he actually writes the British government and is like, hey, we got your guy. He's missing one of his legs. Would you guys mind airdropping another prosthetic for him so he could walk around? To which Britain is like, absolutely, sure, why not? Great Britain launches Operation Leg, where they are given free passage through German airspace to airdrop an extra prosthetic leg for Bata. And then after dropping the leg, they kept going and bombed the local power plant. Hey, look, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. You don't like it? Don't try to take over the entire world. I don't know what else to tell you. So now that Bata's got both his legs, he decides it is going to be his personal mission to be the biggest pain in the ass humanly possible. He is going to constantly try to escape the POW camp, and he is going to fuck with the guards every chance he gets, or as he calls it, goon baiting. One of his first attempts at escape, he's on like the 3rd story of a hospital, so he takes all the bed sheets he can find, ties them together in a rope, just like you see in the movies, ties it to the radiator in the room, throws the rope out the window, but the rope isn't long enough. And he's looking around, he's like, shit, what else can I use? There's a guy in a coma that he's sharing the room with. So he ties the rope to that guy's bed frame and pushes the guy in the coma bed over to the window to get it close enough to the ground. He rappels down to the ground and runs off, but the Germans catch him again. Then after he gets out of the hospital, he goes to a normal POW camp where he tries to Andy Dufresne his way out. He tries to dig a tunnel out of the POW camp using his prosthetic leg as a shovel and taking all the excess dirt that he has, putting it inside of his prosthetic leg and walking a ways with it before falling down to dump out all the excess dirt so they never see any big dirt piles. But eventually that plan gets busted too, and then in August of 1942, after a year in captivity, he finally makes it out of the POW camp. He escapes, and he's gone for like 36 hours. They put out a nationwide manhunt. They're getting posters ready. They are absolutely gonna find this guy. They were getting their ass kicked by him in aerial combat. There is no way that these guys are gonna admit that a man with no legs was able to escape their POW camp. Eventually, they do end up tracking him down, take him back into custody, at which point they decide they're going to send him to Colditz Castle, which is believed to be an inescapable prison, which is apparently where he has to go because they are absolutely not going to let the guy with no legs get away. And that is where he would remain until 1945 when the US Army liberated him and returned him home. From there, he would receive a hero's welcome, retire from the RAF, and then a movie would be made about his life called Reach for the Sky. It is considered to be a classic piece of British film, and it made him one of the most famous men on the planet at this point in time. He then decided that he was going to use all of his newfound fame to put out the message that it was still possible to accomplish things after a horrific injury and becoming disabled. And he became one of, if not the biggest advocate for disabled people on the planet. For this service to the world, he would end up getting knighted by the Queen and officially become Sir Douglas Bata. He would then continue to travel and give talks and advocate for the rest of his life until passing away at the age of 72 on September 5th, 1982. But one of those talks that he gave is actually my favorite part of this entire story because it really captures how much of an anti-hero Douglas Bata really was. He was giving a speech at an all-girls school telling his incredible story about being a pilot during World War II. And at some point during that story, he says, and I quote, "So there were 2 of the fuckers behind me, 3 of the fuckers to my right, and another fucker on the left." At this point, the audience is like, and the headmistress of the school has all the color drained from her face and she goes ghost white. And she's like, ladies, a fucking is a German aircraft. At which point, Sir Douglas Bata replies, and I quote, "That may be, madame, but these fuckers were Messerschmitts." Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go check out thefatelectrician.com, get some merch, subscribe to Patreon. Thanks for watching. Quack bang, out. The lengths haters will go to just to hate will never, ever cease to amaze me.
Well, that was hilarious that the matron of the girls' school tried to pull that one off, saying that that was the name of the German plane. Yeah, that kind of language would be frowned upon, especially at a all-girls school, I would imagine. But there you have it. Another interesting and humorous episode from the Fat Electrician. I will put a link to the original video in the description, and if you have any recommendations of other videos to watch, drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching with me, and remember to hit like and subscribe.